Socrates saw the damage done by the Sophists. If you begin to be confused, if you begin to say, hey, the truth is, there is no truth, then you're not going to take care of your responsibility. The husband whose wife and 6 kids are hard to go home to will just say, hey, now that I've been to that lecture by the Sophists, I don't have to do that. I can leave all that squalling bunch behind. Run off with my secretary, right? Yeah. You can see that's what was happening in Greece. The businessman, he goes to hear the Sophists talk. He hears there isn't any truth. Ooh, that means the bad deal that I made last week is off. And I can just ignore those people. They paid me half the money, and I'm not going to deliver any of the goods. So you can see how things collapse. You can see how society declines from just those 2 examples. And see, that's how you practice philosophy. You look at what is actually happening. You look at the husband who abandons his family. You look at the businessman who cheats his partners. And you can go from there. And the philosophical view is those are only 2 of millions of examples. But they're all based on the same cause. They're all based on if there isn't any truth, then truthfully, I don't have any responsibility. And society plummets. The whole thing collapses. Right? We're pretty much in the middle of that.
The middle?
Not the end.
Well, I wish it were the end.
I was going to say at least ear deep.
Well, yeah, that's a good way to put it. At least ear deep, okay, in the problem. Right? And even the press, which has contributed mightily to the problem,
That's right.
is beginning to notice it. Right? And beginning to say, well, you know what happened in Columbine is really way out of line. Where did that come from?
Over-medicated society.
Why do people whose grandparents couldn't even afford aspirin have 29 pills apiece? Where did this come from? Something has gone wrong. Now what we do, rather than dealing with that where we could really get hurt, we deal with all the people who are safely dead, like Socrates. Okay? And the Sophists of his time. They don't have any relatives who are going to come back and burn our house for saying that these people were wrong. So we look way back 350 years before Christ and we see what's happening. We learn from that. And we recognize that if you attack truth itself, then everything else collapses because it's all based on truth. So if you pay all of these people, the Dick Morrises of their time, to spin doctor all of this stuff, right? To lie, to insult the truth, to make fun of the truth, then this is what you get. So as we see what the Sophists are doing, as we read about them, and we recognize those guys way back then have counterparts that are alive today. Wow. This is why this kind of study of history is generally prohibited in the public schools and universities. Because if you were to learn something, you would no longer be the consumer slave. You would no longer be susceptible to advertisement. If you thought for yourself, even a little bit, even in private, then they couldn't sell you all these things. They couldn't make you jump when they shouted. Above all, they couldn't deafen you and call it music.
Yep.
All of this stuff is possible if and only if people are slaves. Because they don't think for themselves. They have given up on ever accessing truth. So that's a very good description of what Socrates was living with. He could have just given up. He could have said, well, we're going to hang there like everybody else and discuss the shadows. And instead, he began to work at these things. He began to figure something out. He began to say what we ended with. The Sophist says there is no truth. He said, wait, did I hear you right? There is no truth? Yes, that's it. How could that be true? Can it be true? And if it's a lie, why are we paying to hear this guy talk? So the crowds began to diminish. More people began to follow Socrates. It became more the thing to listen to his deflation of all these lies than to pay to hear the Sophists lie. Big difference. And Socrates did the same thing that Thales did. First you have to open up, okay? Then you have to wonder. Then you have to find something that is solid, or we're calling it science. And that's what Socrates did with every one of these pizzazzy examples from the Sophists. Take that one about the water and the stick. The end of the water, it looks bent. Outside the water, the same stick looks straight. What did Socrates explain about that? And the first thing is, the Sophist said, look at the stick in the water. How does it look? Bent. And look at the stick in the air. How does it look? Straight. Then they concluded, you can't trust your senses. This is how Sophists do it. If you can't trust your senses, and you need the Sophist's help. Every time you have a decision, you're going to have to pay the Sophist to make it for you. Because you can't even trust your senses. That's a genuine slavery, if ever there was one. Yeah.
Well, I read a story, and this particular fellow was kind of dunce, but he was into this quite a bit, I guess. He studies it. And instead of looking at he went by a stream of water, and instead of looking at the stick, he just sat there and he says, I can't get it. You know, he was going to, I think he was saying, he said, I just can't get it. He sat there by the stream and he kept looking at trickle of water going over this rock. You probably read the story. Kept going over the rock. Trickle of water going over the rock. And then trickle of water over the rock. And that trickle had formed like a little basin on the rock. And something, I guess, told him, if I stick with it, if I stick with trying to learn by other people, then eventually I may get it. Just looking at the water, but why did you do a trickle? I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good one. You see, if water can wear away a rock, then my continued practice can wear away my ignorance. That's the way we want to think about it. We want to take the richness of our experience and fit it together so that we can see it as a whole, as a unit, as an entirety. And that's exactly what Socrates did. So he said to the Sophists, after they had done this demonstration, he said, Mr. Sophist, did I hear you right? That you can't entrust your senses? Yeah, you cannot trust your senses at all. And then Socrates said, what? How can you develop that? How can you unpack that? How can you say why it was that the Greeks laughed at the Sophists and gradually quit listening to them? If you really can't trust your senses, then why did the Sophist entrust his message to your sense of hearing? You don't have to wait a long time, like the water gradually wearing the rock away. You can make the quick connection. It can't be true that you can't trust your senses, because the Sophist entrusted that message to your sense of hearing. And where did he get the evidence? From your sense of sight. He said, look at it so you could see it. Look at it so you could see it. So he's jumping the gun when he said you can't trust your senses. And what Socrates does instead is a more scientific analysis. He said, you ever notice this is air, that is water? There's a difference. So what you see when you see the bent stick is the difference between air and water. If he had pursued it in modern terminology, he would come up with the index of refraction of light. Air has one index of refraction or bending light. Water has another one. So as the light goes in here, coming, let's say, from the sun, that would be a good place for it to come from, and bouncing back to your eye, it's going to be bent by the water in a different way than it is bent by the air. So the stick better look bent because it's telling you this is water. Now when you look at it outside the water, then it's all in air. It looks straight. If you put it all in water, it will also look straight. These are the very simple things that philosophers do. Another very important principle, simplify.